and welcome to Career Pathways with Adeola Kagho. This is the podcast that brings you real stories, transformative insights to help you navigate your career with clarity and with purpose. So, if you're just starting, or you are reinventing your path, or pursuing global impact, this is the safe space for you to learn and be inspired to take that next step. Today, I'm excited because I have a special guest who is my pastor, Pastor Wale Ekundayo. Pastor Wale Ekundayo's story is one that really showcases resilience, entrepreneurship, leadership, and calling. And I'm sure that today we're going to have a very good conversation with Pastor Wale. Pastor Wale, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank
All
you.
right. All right. Thank you. So, let's dive straight into it. I remain Adeola Kagho, your podcast host, and we're getting straight into it. And I'd like to start with your very early influences. Um, I remember that during one of our previous conversations, you had sort of told me about how things were slightly difficult, very early in your journey. Yet you were able to make your first million at the age of 17. Can you tell us a bit about that story and how it's really shaped your worldview?
Okay, so to some extent, I think I've got a bit of more clarity as to how conversations actually evolved. So my mom was a teacher. My
Mm-hmm.
dad had been an entrepreneur, making a lot of money. I mean, that's how I knew it. It was quite interesting that at some point, growing up, right on our street, my mom goes to a school, or she teaches at a school right across our street. And my dad literally pampered my mom silly, right? Quite. And in fact, there's certain conversations that are coming to my mind now that I'm
Mm,
now thinking about it, that this is where those decisions are coming from. But let me stay on cue. So, that evolution, basically changed my perception to life, because what I saw firsthand was a man who was providing for his family. That was what I knew. In fact, our dad was literally everything. He doesn't joke with school fees. He never joked with, supplies for his children and all of that. So when he passed when I was 9, one of the biggest cry for my mom was the fact that how are these guys going to survive? How is it going to happen? And so, to a large extent, I think I must have picked up that resilient spirit from him, which is the fact
mm,
that we can, you will hear him say, "Don't cry over spilled milk." All right. More often than not. In fact, if there were things that my dad would say, in these days now, they would say things like, what would your father say? My father would always say to you, "Don't cry over spilled milk. Whatever has happened, evolve life and just keep, doing stuff." So when he passed on, and it was quite difficult for my mom because she was a teacher, and in those days there were a lot of strike. When I say strike, like actions being taken by
yeah.
most primary school teachers and all of that, and so they would be out of school. There was no salary, and it was extremely difficult. At some point, we were sent to go and ask for from my father's relative, to ask for rice and stuff. And the way she abused us and told us our dad never did anything for her and all of that, those things were extremely painful, you know.
Mm,
So I said to myself that there would never be a time in my life where I would be at the mercy of anyone. And so
mm,
that particular thing just kept going on in my mind. Every time I sleep, I wake up, is that there must be a self-sustaining system that allows me to transcend begging anyone for anything.
mm,
So I think that started the journey of entrepreneurship. It started out with as a thought, which is, so if we're not going to beg, what then should we do? There were quite a number of people who were doing fraud at the time as well, even if it's local fraud, so to speak, but we wouldn't join. And thank God for God, were now being channeled through some aunties and sisters who were around our neighborhood, who would take us to church and then were impacting the word of God. We started that friendship conversation, and from that we evolved. And so perception or perspective to different life were being shown, was being mirrored to us. We saw that life could actually be better. We could actually have significant and meaningful lifestyle without us having to dabble into any kind of funny business. So that started out. So I had friends in Foursquare Gospel Church, for CAC, for instance. I had friends in there, and we moved our friendship from being spiritual friendship into business. And
Mm.
from there, they had different perspective as well to life. And so they said, oh, what if we do this? What if we do this? And that way we started our business at the time. So we would buy computers for banks. Those were the years where they were coupling computers, the desktop computers. I could remember UTB Bank and a couple of other ones, where we'll buy computer parts. Some of them were doing hardware, hard disk, and all of that, put the screen together. Some of them were fairly used and stuff. So we were doing massive stuff at the time. There was Cyber Cafe. I think it was in the beginning of Cyber Cafe where you had to do networking and a couple of other things like that, and then we dabbled into software installation, installing Microsoft in people's computers and stuff. And it was everything that has to do with that. And it was quite an
Wow.
interesting year, I think, yeah.
All
So
at
yeah,
that young age. Wow.
oh yeah, oh yeah, because I think for them, they were very exposed. That's some of my friends. In fact, all of them were older than I am, but I'd never been in a relationship with people who I was younger than or my peers. So they basically just exposed me to a number of things that could possibly happen, even though I was the one who brought everybody together to say, you know what, all these friendships. So we will joke, we will laugh, we will play, we would do a lot of things. We're coming from secondary school into writing jam, GCE, and all of those things. So they had done some of those things ahead. Some of them failed. Some of our counterparts had a stable home where there was father, there was mother, there was all of those things. And so sometimes we go to their houses and then I would see how things are being done. So their father would be encouraging them to say, you know what, you guys can do business. When I was your age, I was hearing some of those things for the first time. How is it possible for this chap to be able to do those things? But they were doing them. So by the time we structured the entire thing, it was quite interesting how we got involved. I mean, some of them were
Yeah.
already in the Harvard
So
College of Technology
it
even before
looks
I came
like
in.
the
And
early
so it was easy
influences.
for us to, I mean, and of course, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry. So it looks like, very, very, very early when dad was there, things were normal. But when he
Mhm.
then passed away, things changed. And that really sparked something in you, that
Yeah,
made you really, really want to be successful. And
yeah,
that's why you started, making all these connections with the people that you eventually started getting to do business with. And at the age of 17, you were then able to get into
yeah.
making your first million. Wow, what an amazing story. All right, so let's look at your early education. This is a career podcast, so we'll examine your early education. You had told me that you studied microbiology, but if I look at what you've done, it spanned across IT, marketing, digital media,
Yeah,
entrepreneurship, leadership, all
yeah,
sorts of things that you've done.
yeah,
Yet it was microbiology that you studied,
yeah.
and you are, an entrepreneur at the moment. Now, knowing what you know, based on where you are today, knowing what you know and the skills that you know is required to thrive, in terms of what you are doing for a living, what would you have studied, knowing what you know now about the world of work and how you are currently positioned? What would you have studied? And, if there's any professional out there, who wants to be where you are and is looking to make some educational decisions, and also looking at the way the world of work has evolved now, what would be your suggestion for them?
Okay, so what initially I wanted to be a medical doctor,
Okay.
and for some again, some of those things where I never had any counseling from anyone to tell me that
Mm,
this is what you have the flair for. So I personally believe, and against what anybody would say, I think God basically was just guiding my path in
pass,
the
yeah.
most significant way. So I wanted to study microbiology. I didn't get the right score to be able to do that, and which was what forced me into polytechnic in the first place. And then I did science laboratory technology at the handy level, and then HND was the microbiology aspect of it. Now, from secondary school, from GSS to SS, for instance, one of the gravitating factor was the fact that anybody who passed very well went to science class.
Mm,
The other people would go to what's it called now? The people who didn't pass very well, except people who were guided by their parents, they would tell them, for instance, go to commercial class or go to what's it called now? What's it art class? They call it the art class. So that's where you find the guys who are lawyers and stuff. So first of all, I personally have flair for having to understand law, for instance. And the reason why I know that is that even right now, it's easier for me to possibly even teach the gospel in not just a scientific way, but in a legalistic way, which is the fact that the realm of the spirit is legalistic, for instance. I'm digressing. But essentially, I would have been a lawyer. I think I actually liked the concept of having to do some of those things. But there is a part of me that likes to see cause and effect. When I
mm,
say cause and effects, which means that if you do one, two, three, you will get four, five, six. The sciences that we did sort of ruined my perception to that because the equipment we had, they were old, and so we couldn't really see when we test things in the laboratory and all of that. So we're copying each other to draw a more, for instance. So we never really did any of those things. So I liked what was closer was computing. And the reason is that when they write a command, we see the effect of the command. So there was a part of me that liked the fact that if you mix things together, you are able to get a result out of life. And that's actually my worldview to life, so to speak. So when people come and say, I did this and did that and I didn't get results, I don't believe it because there must have been. So in sciences, you do an experiment, there's what they call an inference, and there is what they call the summary. You will come out with those things. So from a career perspective, I wanted a situation whereby if you do one, two, three, you should be able to see result. So if from a legal point, I really would have loved to, do that, which is being a lawyer. But to be very honest, I think the overriding factor of me wanting to see results, I would probably have gone back and be a computer guru. All right. But I think I like to explain. So what bridged it and how I knew was that by the time my friends came, whenever they write softwares, I am the one explaining to people. They are very geeky in terms of, this is what this thing does. Once I understand what they're saying, I can explain it to a layman that you need to automate your process. And the reason why you need to automate your process is that this and this will be the result. Then they understand. So we're getting more sales by reason of me closing deals because I understood what they are trying to say. They can do the programming, but they can't explain it.
yeah. So, some of my key takeaways are the fact that the lack of guidance counseling actually made you to go and study microbiology.
Correct.
Um, and based on some of the things that you do today and what you think are your strengths, you feel that law would have been a good way to go.
Yep.
But then again, perhaps it would have been computing. Am I
Correct.
correct?
Very correct. Very
So if there's
correct.
somebody out there who's looking at your profile and really loves how your journey has turned out, if you were going to give that person career advice from an educational standpoint, what course would you suggest?
Um, I think there's a personality. There's a personality involved as well. Because I have the privilege of also being a father to my son,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm doing that right now, which is that it is very is cerebral in the kind of things he does. He likes drawings, for instance, but there is a personality that is also superimposed on whatever it is your outcome is. So there is a tendency for people to just focus on their strengths and not focus on what we will call the soft skills. So there are a
Mm.
lot of doctors who are extremely brilliant, but deep down within themselves, they are not supposed to be in medical. Even if they are in medical field, they should be in sales of medical, because by the time they speak, so for me, I discovered my speaking, even though I mean, if anybody should ask, I'm an introvert, for instance. Now, there is no one that I would tell who will say that you can't possibly be an introvert. I like my space. Going out stresses me out in every possible way. The only place that I find comfort is in church, right? So when people so if I'm to advise anyone, so to speak, who probably has my flair, which is what I am doing right now, I'll tell the person to go to sales, go into the commercial field, learn about marketing, because ultimately marketing is actually life. What I've
Mm.
found out is that marketing is in every aspect of life. If you're going to get married, you have to market yourself. If you're going to get collaboration, get new businesses, get any of those things, marketing is the bane of everything. Jesus, so to speak, is the chief marketing officer, laid down the principle, got disciples, infused into them, and gingered them for years to come. And we're still marketing the gospel till date. So anyone who understands marketing will be able to actually not just generate new businesses, because to be honest, a business is standing today not because of innovation, but because of marketing. Apple product could be fantastic and it could have gone under the ground. I mean, Nokia, for instance, was really fantastic, but the evolution of it and the marketing aspect of it was lacking, and so a lot of people didn't know about it. So there are so many things that has life in view, that if you understand marketing, you will realize that that actually is the bane of life. I make a joke most of the time when I have conversations with people. So when God says that come and buy without money, I practiced it in real life, like in real life, that come and buy without
Yeah.
money. That at some point when I got to, I think it was InterSwitch at the time, long ago, when InterSwitch started, they were doing gateways and stuff. And one of our business was that we were connecting all the schools, University of Ibadan, University of Ife, University of Lagos, all the different departments and the parastatals and subsidiaries in University of Lagos. I had to go and speak to each and every one of them why they needed to computerize their system and stuff. So anyone who is in my space, for instance, I would say to them, honestly speaking, go and learn about marketing. So what I'm telling my children too is that even when you are technical, you must understand the art of actually explaining and convincing people. One of the books I read long ago was The Art of Persuasion. You must understand that for anything to happen, for anybody to believe in you, even in an interview. That's why most people fail interview, for instance. They have the thing, but they don't know how to
You can market
communicate.
it.
They
Mm.
can market it. And you are the first person who would market yourself. If you can't do that, you might have all the brilliant ideas and stuff, but nothing is ever going to happen. And that's really is the missing link between everyone. I've been in business for years now, and when I sit down with people, I realize that they might have the thing, but it really, even medical doctors, there are loads and loads of information out there, solutions to people's problems, for instance, that most people don't know because they have it, but they can't even get it out.
Yeah.
So if I were to ask anyone right now, go straight. And some of these things you can't learn them in school. It's a mix and match of practice. It's a mix and match of learning the basics and actually getting into the thing and having that conversation done. So yeah.
Right. So, for you, anyone who's looking or is inspired by your career should just consider going straight to
Marketing,
marketing.
marketing,
You had talked
marketing.
about commercial, but making sure that marketing comes out really strong in
Mhm.
terms of whatever it is they're getting education in. Fantastic. And you already started speaking to my next question, but I'll still get into it, which is around your further education that you got. So you then went and got an MBA at
Yes,
Liverpool University.
yes,
And you also told me that a lot of your learning has been experiential.
hands
You've
on.
learned a lot of things by experience and also learning by yourself. And what we find in the world of work today is a lot of people are accumulating or gathering a lot of degrees. How would you describe, what balance really should be? Is one more important than the other, or how should professionals think about that balance?
Okay, so let me just say this here. I mean, I think the bane of my organization also speaks to that. I can't remember the last time I checked anybody's certification.
Mm,
I actually don't give any attention to certification, and it's intentional because the world that we're in is extremely productive. Now, what do you say to people, for instance, who go and study abroad in the UK, for instance, and they end up as what's it called now, caregivers, right?
mm,
After the masters, after the MSCs, after all of those things, and you wonder what to what extent, the truth about the matter is that everybody must be in the productive center of any institution. In Nigeria, excuse me, in Nigeria, for instance, if we're not at the production center of what this thing is, after some time, we would actually see a lot of things fizzle out. I don't give any major credence to it. If somebody comes to me, for instance, show me what you have got to do. Don't ramble, don't put in. Now, there might be other indication or maybe challenges with those things, and some of them are actually predicated upon character. So those guys might not have as much character as they should, but primarily, if somebody says, I can deliver on a particular thing, you can manage all of those other things because at the bane of it, I was having somebody came to my office yesterday, or no, no, sorry, last week's Friday, and was pitching me on a thing. And I said, now, this is a fantastic idea that you've brought in. Who is going to be the business development person, aka sales? He kept quiet because you can have a brilliant idea. If somebody is not a marketer, if somebody is not a go-to person, which is this person will get it done, which means getting new businesses, that business will shut down literally. And so we need to begin to prioritize the folks who are doers, the
mm,
people who will get things done. Because when you don't get things done, there will be a lot of English and there will be a lot of politics. In an organization where you don't have doers, people will be speaking plenty English, MPRs will be full of QPRs, will be full of English and excuses and all of those things. But when it boils down to results, at the end of the day, an organization must bring returns on investment. So what I look out for, to be honest, I do not give any, I don't even know which school people went to. The
mm,
only people that I remembered that they went to school are the people who joined me at the beginning of my organization. Half of the other people I don't know. But if they say to you that this person did such and such, you'll be like, okay, you've caught my attention now. Come, let's have a conversation. So we've got to move from English to those things. Now, certification just gives you, and even the four walls of school just gives you connection, your ability to practice your soft skill. People say things like, when was the last time you used calculus? When was the last time you did all of those things? The school actually teaches our brain to persevere, solve complex problems, the ability to research and do multiple things at the same time and succeed at all. That's what it just raises your capacity to be able to do that. And sometimes it's also in consonance with your brain function that the brain of a person doesn't advance to a I mean, we employed a guy from what's it called now, Covenant University, brilliant chap. Now, the guy does powerful presentations, clarity of thought and stuff. but he's childish. So when somebody criticizes him, he cries in the office. When people, so I knew that he wasn't matured. His brain function hasn't got into the level where, he can coordinate himself to understand that this is life. He's brilliant, but you can help that person, for instance, to grow in that regard. But to say that you can't deliver, that you're just speaking English, somebody went into did mechanical engineering. You have all the certification in the world, but you don't know how to remove a tire. Nobody cares for you. Nobody really wants to see those kind of people. We want people who can do things. And so I really would, if you have 12 certification, I really don't care for it. But if you say to me that in the next 20 months, I'll bring in 40 clients, I want to see you deliver those things.
Hmm.
And I'm never going to prioritize certificate over results. I don't do that. I've never done it. Even the system at the office, for instance, the HR system was not set up that way.
Wow. Wow. So, I mean, I think what I'm hearing is it's not that you are against people getting the basic or foundational education that they require, because they learn certain skills when they go through the four walls of school. But for you, what is more important is performance, is result.
Yes.
You don't want people coming, with so much or too many certifications or degrees, but cannot deliver on the job,
And
which makes absolute sense. So there has to be that balance. Whilst you get the education, you should
yes,
also be able to show
absolutely.
results. You should
Absolutely.
be able to solve problems. And you are correct. I mean, we do have that critical problem in our country where people learn a lot of or have a lot of theoretical knowledge, but when it comes to application, there are a lot of gaps. So yeah, thank you for highlighting the fact that
Yeah,
despite the fact that people are gaining a lot of getting a lot of degrees, they also need to balance it with experiential learning and showing results. Thank you so much for
absolutely.
that. All right, so I'd like to now move into the theme of entrepreneurship. I know that you started a business, the business you were telling us about earlier on, e-image, and that business became really big. But somehow you got kicked out of that business for whatever reason. Can you
Yeah.
tell us a bit about that story and
Oh,
what
yes.
lessons you learned so that
Okay.
anyone will not get into such a situation again? People won't make
Oh,
similar.
well, all right. So e-image had all of us as friends starting out, which is the company that did all the networking business, the computing and all of that. We pivoted e-image because we realized that some of the people who were there weren't pulling their weights, or they were distracted, they were doing other things, they had other priorities. So from e-image, we moved into the another company called the Grid Infotech Limited. The Grid
Okay.
Infotech Limited was what did the bulk of the work on software development, HR solutions, school management system, file system. In fact, we wrote what's it called now? We developed a solution for Unilag, the bursary, where so they used to handwrite checks at the time. So we developed a system that prints checks, that write checks. So once they put it on Excel sheets, all you just needed to do was do that, just put it on, and we could print all the checks and stuff. The guy who write checks back then in Bosnia was the king. If he goes on what's it called now, on lunch break, there will be no writing of checks until he comes back. So he was getting a lot of hampers, a lot of things. But by the time we did all of those systems, they changed it. Now, what had happened was that I was about getting married at the time, and you being an entrepreneur, there was a lot of pressure as to what it is that my life would be in the next session. So what had happened was at the time where I was about getting married, and I was thinking about how to pivot this conversation about this entrepreneurship, because there was some things that we did not learn. All of us didn't learn. So every time we make money, we will share the money. we were able to remove some money to pay rent and stuff. So we go broke every time. So there was no
Mm.
salary structure. Nobody taught us that we could have salaries. We could do all of those things. So everybody shared based on, it was almost like a project kind of thing. So it was a company, but it wasn't structured. People come at any point in time. Some of us were even doing individual, personal businesses and stuff. So by the time I got married and all of that, I started thinking about it that this thing is not going to work. What should happen? So only for them to come to me to say, you know what? And I was the one who, came up with the knowledge, because all of the us at the time had gone into Yabatech. So technically, we filtered the people who were not in Yabatech at the time and then started a new company. So by the time we did all of that, they came and says, you know what? They are the ones who does all the coding and stuff, and they also can explain. They thought that they could explain a lot of all those things and stuff. So it says, you know what, we don't think you can be our MD anymore. That we've been thinking about it, that you can't be the MD. I said, so I got married. So went to told my wife what happened. She said, just calm down. So long story cut short, it was so painful that most of the time, because I was a signatory A, every time they want to withdraw money, they will bring the checkbook to me. I will sign for them because they couldn't even change the name. They couldn't close down the accounts and all of that. I will sign it. They would, go and withdraw the money and all of that. But what had happened was I realized that there was a knowledge gap, which is
Mm.
why sometimes when people speak about, and I think personally, in retrospect, I think that was what God was trying to do. There was a knowledge gap that we didn't know. None of us knew how an organization was being run. So my mentor at the time told me to help employ someone for a particular role as a digital director at the first advertising agency in Nigeria. So I didn't tell him, so I just applied for the job and I got the role because of all of my works that I've done before. So I got the role. That was the first time I realized that people, as an entrepreneur, they come in early. They resume before 8 a.m. and then they have a set time they close. And the grind was serious. That I loved the rudiment and the routine. I started learning that not every organization doesn't always have money all year round. They save. They put money aside even when there is a boom. They don't just increase salaries arbitrarily. There was conversation. There was what they call appraisal. All the years of being an entrepreneur at the time, there was no appraisal. Nobody had any system that, we just increase money every two months, every whatever that we get money and all of that. So I started learning that this is what this thing was on and about. So when I got into the first advertising agency in Nigeria, which is Low Linters at the time, all right, what had happened was I started learning all of those things. Then once I did that, I wrote a proposal to another organization called Varanzil. And, they said, oh, you can be the director, that's the MD of a subsidiary. Now, you will recall that what brought me here was all of the works that I've done as an entrepreneur while I was younger. So the role, I never played any lower role, even as I was transitioning. So it was always been in the management role based on the works that I've done. So they
Yeah.
weren't aware that I was learning, but I was learning as I was going. So when I got to Varanzil, which is what I think when I did the best of the works, which is left whatever it is that I was, because at the time when I got in, they were earning that subsidiary was earning 500,000 naira. By the time I left, I was doing over 500 million a year with 5 staff. So
Yeah,
what
I,
I
I still
learned,
want to I still want to go back to when you were forced out of that organization, just for
right,
us to draw the lessons from there. So
mm,
what I heard you say was that that was an unstructured organization,
right,
and the people who had asked you to leave, even though you were the one who put everyone together to start this
mm,
business, they looked at you like, okay, you cannot even code, so we don't want
mm,
you to be our MD anymore.
yes,
And
yes,
the way I'm looking at it, you also weren't bringing the structure. So perhaps if
yes,
you were bringing that on board, then they would have been able to see the value of you being their managing director. But it looks like that they
Correct.
weren't seeing it like that at that point in
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Because they
So
didn't know
what?
better.
Yeah, exactly. So what would you then say? I mean, are there any lessons that young
Oh yeah,
people
yeah.
who, yeah.
Oh yeah. There's a major lesson, and one of the major lessons in this particular conversation is that it's always best for someone to learn within a structure,
Mm,
which is why when anybody says they have an idea, one of the first things I'm asking them is that, have you ever worked in an organization where there is structure? Because that thing in itself helps you to calm down and understand the life cycle of what you're doing. The biggest lesson for any entrepreneur, anybody starting from ground zero, is that go and work in an organization. First of all, don't just try to go through the ranks. Put your
mm,
eyes in the HR. Put your eyes in finance. Put your eyes. You might not be at the management level, but make friends with some of them. Let them even. So, what do you people do at board meetings? Because some people, we don't even know what a board meeting is. How should you be seated? What should you be looking out for? What are the KPIs that the board is looking at or they are looking for when you are electing somebody on the board? What should you be? All of those things we didn't know.
mm,
So the beginning and end of story was that there was money to be made and there was money to be shared. After that, every other thing is found in between. Now, because I was the MD, I was closing deals, which is on some of the conversations that they were having. But some of them felt that we can also close those deals too,
yeah,
right? They felt they could also close those deals because they were the ones doing the coding and all stuff. So for me, it was that major lesson was not enough to generate deals or open deals or closing deals. It was the fact that if I understood that structure is and to be honest, even if I knew what structure was, right, to tell them that this thing would help the organization's longevity, I might not be able to prove it. Because what friendship did was that there was no pedigree. If somebody comes, let's say for instance, somebody came to join us at the time and says, I am from so and so organization. I can help you guys. There is this thing. If you do it this way, maybe they would have listened. But because we're friends and stuff, I've never been to any organization. None of them have ever worked in any organization. So what exactly are you bringing to the table? That was the major gap. And you can't do a skill analysis gap when you don't even know that there was a gap in the first place.
yeah, yeah,
So it
absolutely.
was a major challenge for us at the time. And I think that was one of the reasons why that is. If I was to tell anyone, that's why anybody who is younger, for instance, don't just go into your organization to do. So people go and do IT, for instance, or they do vacations, what you might call it now, placements and stuff. Don't just do those things. Sit with people, go into their minds, learn what those things are, until you understand the rigors of that. Moses was in Pharaoh's house to understand certain things. So going through the rank, you were able to understand the different dynamics of how businesses run. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I.
Yeah, that was a very powerful takeaway. Sometimes people find themselves in, spaces where they haven't been prepared for, and that learning is still really key. So you would say to people that even if you find yourself in such positions, it's important that you somehow find a way to get the
Correct.
learnings that you require. For you at that time, if you had a lot of knowledge about how organizations work from a structural process point of view, you probably would have been able to salvage that situation
Correct.
and bring something else on board to that business that you were
Correct.
in. All right, but that then led you to going back into paid employment. So you were ME and you were an entrepreneur. Now you had to go back into paid employment. Were there any lessons that you learned afterwards that you have carried now on into your current space and how you
Yeah.
lead now?
Oh yeah. One of the
That season of being an entrepreneur and
yeah,
then now having
and
to
then
go back
yeah,
to paid
yeah,
employment.
yeah.
Yes.
I mean, one of the first things I learned was, that proper structure of
Yeah.
organization, department, LIRS, FIRS, all the different statutory bodies, not just respecting them, but also being compliant, from that standpoint. Number two was having different departments intertwined. I learned, for instance, in the first organization, which is load interest, that it is better to be understaffed than to be overstaffed,
Mm,
because there will be that redundancy, and there will be politics, and there will be idleness, and there will be partiality. So Varanzil taught me that, because everybody was working round the clock. Everybody was working around it. There was never a time that people weren't working. So you'll find out that there were blur lines where a finance person is understanding what every other person is doing, how to structure the thing, which is why I learned that with 5 staff, I could make 500 million, right? Because the mandate was very clear. You've got to use little to produce more. All right. Well, it wasn't a good thing, but people weren't going on leave as people would go on leave like that. So, also leveraging on younger people to be able to do certain things and all of that. It was quite instructive on how the evolution of work was for me, because the dynamics, those were the lessons that I got from there and brought into my current organization that I'm running. That's that situation of let these people do what they are supposed to do, and crunch the time. And it became our unique selling points, which means our turnaround time. We can guarantee that when you give us something to do, it will be easier, because I saw some of those loopholes also in those places. So you get a brief, somebody prints it, carries it all the way down. There was a department called traffic and all. I'm like, what's all this? So those things were crunched, you know, we didn't need, and somebody comes to work. So I said, the first organization said, so you mean somebody came to work to carry brief, that's on paper, inside a file, go and bring it to somebody acknowledges it, then they call a team. Yeah. When are we going to answer the client? Now we now have a client who says that's this generation, the people who really want, the things done almost immediately. They send you a brief today. By the end of close of business, you are already showing them strategy and the different dynamics of it. So I leverage on that as a unique selling point to start the new business, to say, don't worry, our turnaround time is top notch, which was the gap that was seen in that particular place. And then I brought that into what we call Cerebral today.
So the things that jump at me were that season, which sort of appeared to be a season that would be a bit humbling, made you learn things like resource management,
Correct.
staff optimization,
Correct.
even service delivery.
Correct.
Those were the things that you've learned and you have now carried forward into the way that you do your own business at the moment. And I guess that, it shows that there's always light. So even though you had to leave one organization, there were
Yeah.
so many things that were gained from joining another one as an employee that you've now carried forward into entrepreneurship
Correct.
going forward. Okay, so afterwards, you are now a man of many parts.
Right.
And you've done quite a lot of businesses. I know that you are into digital marketing, or is it digital media?
No, 360, which is like the entire marketing. But
Okay.
we started out
A
as digital
full
media,
blown,
but yeah, full blown advertising agency. Yeah.
full blown marketing. I know that you also run a football club. You've
Yeah.
run filling
Filling
stations,
stations. Yes.
and you pastor a thriving church with a lot of people. How do you get the capacity to balance all these responsibilities?
And I'm still a full-time father and a full-time husband.
Exactly, an husband.
Okay, so I like to say, I like to use this word, that some of these things are callings. They're so
Mm,
one of the first things I said to, anywhere I've gone to speak, is that they are probably one and the same. Because to be honest with you, if you treat your marriage like you treat your business, you will get results across board. The moment you become extremely too emotional, even in business, the moment you become that's why most CEOs get fired, you become emotional. And I say to people, my friends are the people who are delivering. And I saw that pattern from Jesus as well. When they asked him, your brothers and sisters, he said, my brothers and sisters are the ones who are here. Now, in my marriage, for instance, or in my relationship with my children, for instance, every year people have KPIs. And it's not just to pass. It's not just to pass exams. Even the what's it called now? The housekeeper has a KPI. Just today, there was a conversation with my son sending a very um, deep text to my wife as to that he would ask for help from the housekeeper, and the housekeeper says that her own KPI says that she should not help him, which is true because for basic things like food, you should be able to, a 10-year-old should be able to make his own food by himself and be okay, with whatever the outcome is, because life is going very fast. And she's been threatened that the day, you know, you don't follow that, there'll be a challenge. So my wife also has a KPI, not just in emotional state, in your business. So everybody has their KPIs, so to speak, across board. Now, when everybody follow that dictates, it becomes a lot more easier. So I sit at the top level, basically managing the result of everybody, including my own result, because their own outcome is my own outcome as well. So what I look at is that the church, for instance, looks at a particular there are KPIs in terms of not just numbers but spiritual growth of people. So when you start to hear testimonies of people saying, oh, I practice this, I got this, at the office as well, we're looking at the numbers every quarter. What are we looking at? How many clients have you been able to retain? Have you been able to do more with your existing clients? Oh, fantastic. Have you been able to get new clients? Oh, yes, you're doing well. Can we ramp this thing up to the next level? And this is how life actually is in general across board, without any recourse to emotional whatever it is. Because the day you become, oh, you've done very well. Because I say to people, anybody who is close to me, you're as good as your last performance. I can't say,
Mm.
for instance, I'm a good father. I paid school fees last year. There will be there will be conversations about this year. The school will not keep hailing me for, you paid, you're such a good father that you paid last year. This year is here, all right? You've got to deliver. My office people don't like me because my face is fine. They like me because when it's time to pay salaries, you show up. So there is no what's it called now, blurry lines. So when people say all of those things, if everybody does what they're supposed to do and we are improving generally, it becomes a fantastic thing across board. And so year in, year out, people are expecting you to deliver, and you must deliver. So when people tell me, oh, you do a lot, even in the business of the football, for instance, it's top line conversations. Top line conversations. How many players have we sold? How many of them are improving? Don't get emotional. You can't be, people can, and the football is very cruel, extremely cruel. That you can be performing last year, and if you don't perform this year, even the fans will start to react in a certain way. Oh boy, remove this guy. So there are no emotions to it. And I think that's how God works. God is not God because everybody likes him. God is God because you and I can still breathe.
Yeah.
You and I can still do that. So there are, I mean, if we woke up, for instance, and people are dropping off the face of the earth, you will look to him and say, man, you said you will give us breath. What's going on here? So there are certain conversations that we must begin to evaluate on the premise of the works that we bring to the table. And that's how life is. It is not, it is not. So when people tell me, how do I balance it? I believe in hard work. I believe not just in hard work by mouth. I believe in hard work that generates result. I believe in hard work on the premise of I am still delivering today. And I want to also believe that on the backdrop of everything, that God is enabling us to be able to deliver all of those things every time. I believe to the point where you've got to keep your body whole and healthy. So there are certain conversations about food that you should not participate in if you're going to keep consistently delivering. So I think that basically, speaks to that. Yeah.
I'll tell you what I'm hearing.
Hmm.
What I'm hearing firstly is that one, God is enabling you. It's a calling. I'm hearing that. But I'm also hearing that you bring in management skills into everything that you do. Because even with your family, people have their KPIs, you look at
Yes.
continuous improvement. So you bring this to every aspect of your life, and it makes things a lot easier.
Easier.
So
Yes.
things that are supposed to, and then you also look at the foundational things such as your nutrition that then
Yes.
helps you to be whole so that you can perform. So
Correct.
those are the things that I'm hearing. And am I
Very,
correct in
very,
my
very,
statement?
very correct. Very, very correct. Thank you so much for
Fantastic.
for the summary. Thank you. Yeah.
Fantastic. So you told me a story, a very interesting story about how somewhere along the line, and I don't know if this business still exists today, you had to manage 48 filling stations,
Stations.
and those filling stations were handed over to you by someone.
Yes.
Um, Firstly, why do you think that that kind of opportunity came your way, your own way? And is there any takeaway for people, out of that experience of someone just coming to hand you 48 filling
Yeah.
station?
All right. So what I believe is that when a person increases their capacity for anything, whether they like
Firstly,
it
if
or
you
not.
don't mind, can you tell us about that story? It's a very interesting story that someone is just
Okay,
going to.
so what
Yeah,
had happened was that I bought a car and I was going to service the car. And in fact, that moment was a moment of a lot of crisis. So our first son was diagnosed with what's it called, sickle cell. And in the process of going to India for bone marrow transplant, business started booming. And I think I had bought 3 cars in one day. I had bought a property all in the span of that transaction with India. So I was going to service the car when it was due. I think you know that first mileage thing, about
yeah,
servicing. So I went to the place where I bought it, and then they said it's going to take 3 weeks or so because a lot of people were on ground. So they had opened a filling station, the first solar powered filling station around Onigbagbo rather. So I went there. I got in and then they said, you guys do this. Say, yeah, yeah, we do that. So what had happened was, so after they did all of that, so I went there and I said, I want to service this car with you. And then they said, oh, you can wait. And we will do the service for you. So the owner of the filling station came, was wearing a white, was good. And the Holy Spirit said, speak to this man and say to him that, you have a proposal for him. I said, no, we don't have a proposal. I said, just speak to him. So I spoke to him. I went back to the office. I told the guys, this and this and these are things we wanted to do. At the time, I did not know that Uber was coming into Nigeria. So as I got into the office, somebody had reached out to me to say, do you know anyone who could do this Uber servicing and all of that? And I was like, I was coming from that particular place. So that was the proposal. So by the time I presented it to the man to say, oh, there is a proposition and we could come up with a tech solution to be able to do all the parameters that Uber wanted and all of that, that was it. So the man, when I spoke to him, the guy said, I'm a king. I want to go back to my hometown and be governing the thing there and all of that. I don't want to be running up and down and all of that. So he said, can you run this thing? I said, yeah, why not? He says, okay, I'm handing this thing over to you. You just give me a certain percentage every time you make money at the end of the month. I said, what did you say? He said, yeah, I trust you. I said, but you just met me. He said, I'm a king. I have intuition. I know when I see the wrong person and the right person. With what you've done, I think you can do this. And that was it. And some of the filling stations, if I call the brand name, you will be shocked. Some of where those places are, and the evolution of that, it led to a lot of things. I did not know that at some point, we could even do outdoor advertising from there because people are coming to filling stations. If I told you all the things that happened as a result of that particular conversation, and I'd always had the mind like an Igbo man that every day money must be coming in. This advertising thing, we are going to wait for a brief before that happens. So we had to put boards on some of the filling stations, run advertising on those things. So maximized the thing. So when I told the man said, Shiva, I told you that you are the right person for this. Because by the time I was giving him his cut, it was like, this money cannot be coming from just filling station. It is what else are you doing? I said, we have to partner with this partner. He said, what? So the expansion of the conversation was a whole lot in one. So aside from the loo base, aside from the filling station, there were other ancillary services that came, from that particular conversation. I remembered we also partnered with some traveling people who didn't want to go to the park, and they were using the filling station like a bus park where the people are traveling, maybe interstate. They will use us, they will pay us from picking up passengers there and going to the countries and stuff, and they were booking online. It was massive. Now, because of the downstream conversation and all of that, we had to sell all of those things because the transition was quite clear. The margin has dropped and all of that. All the other ancillary services had gone. So there are businesses that start for a reason. And at some point, you have to just pivot the entire conversation. And of course, with the landed properties, with the other conversations, all the assets and stuff, it was a good deal. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
That's it.
something that came out strongly was trust. I have the word
Yeah.
trust.
Yeah.
And I mean, for somebody to hand over such a business to you, there must have been something that you demonstrated that made the
Yeah.
person feel that this is the kind of person that we can hand over.
Yes.
So
Mm.
it was, you had definitely done some things that made you appear to be trustworthy.
Oh yeah.
And when you then got the opportunity, you also expanded it even beyond what the
Oh,
person who had handed it over to you could even imagine. So trust is
yeah.
very key for our young professionals. You know, anytime we
Absolutely.
get opportunities, we need to behave in ways that make people trust us even the more. And when
Yeah.
these opportunities come our way, just like the story of the talent, we need to do something about
Splendid.
doubling or making it better than
Yeah.
how we met it. Yeah, so thanks for that. That
Absolutely.
was powerful. I
Thank you.
recall that we also discussed that it was not all, rosy. There were businesses that you tried or ventures that you went
Mm,
into that didn't
mm,
do well.
mm.
So do you want to share a bit with us around, what
Um,
went wrong in those businesses so that people
right.
who are aspiring to be entrepreneurs can also take note and be
Yeah.
aware of that?
So one of the things I learned in the process of this entrepreneurship journey was never to dabble into what I didn't have all the resources to do. So in making some of the money, one of my people, the chief operating officer at the time, said to me, said, you know what, let's not keep this money. Let's find a way to keep turning it around. So she has suggested, you know what, we can actually start borrowing people money, and then they would, we get collateral, they will return the money, yada yada yada, and all of that. Because she was coming from a finance perspective, she actually was working in a finance house at the time before she had joined us. Again, for me, which is why I was speaking about certificates and stuff. I never wanted anybody who, was bringing certificates to me and saying that, so she was full of ideas. So I would employ from anywhere. If I see what's it called? Personally, I believe I'm digressing now. Personally, I believe the guys who are in the traffic are better salespeople than the people who are carrying certificates. Because anybody who knows how to turn a no into sales knows they have perseverance. And to be honest, you can't teach those things in school because some people start crying if you tell them no. They are depressed after one no. So you see some of those people like that. So we started out in that particular thing. Long story short, they were in pain. And because some of the people who knew me from, let me use the word, a religious perspective. So they were being manipulative as to, but you're a pastor. Why are you collecting collateral? Didn't God say you should do business without interest and all of those things? So God asked me, did I tell you to do that business? I did not tell you. So we closed it down completely and just let the money go. because it was a major learning point. And I mean, there are other ones, some of the billboards we set up at some point, we weren't told to do that, but we had cash and stuff. We imported some of those things from China, everything. In fact, at some point, I closed it down, gave out those boards to people, like not even sell it. I gave it up completely because it was not on instruction, which is why when you hear me speak, I'm saying that entrepreneurship is a calling, because when God calls you into a place to function effectively, you will do the things that He has asked you to do and you will deliver. And the way you would deliver is that you'll find that ease and that grace to be able to do those things effectively. And everybody will say, how are you doing this thing? You must. In fact, people told me at some point in meetings that I thought you went to Harvard. Yeah, 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 because there's this certain sense of, the level of your business acumen is synonymous to these kind of things. But to be honest with you, some of those things are gotten on the streets. Some of those things are gotten by just dealing in business. I mean, so those are two of those businesses that I had to shut down at some point.
So it seems like what you're saying is that you didn't really hear God on those two
Oh, no,
businesses.
no, no.
So
They're
for
just good
those,
ideas.
absolutely. So beyond having a great idea, what you are telling our professionals is that it's still important to seek the face of
Oh,
God
yeah.
before you
Yeah.
go into any venture. Otherwise, you'll end up closing it if God's
Oh,
hand is
yeah.
not in it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
And you
for,
might actually even lose relationships in the process as well.
yeah. All right. I also recall that you had said to me that, and now we're moving into your pastoral role.
Yeah.
You had said to me that very early in your life, you are taking up a lot of different roles in church and all that. But at what point did you eventually decide that you were going to really get into church leadership?
Mm. Um, Let me say this, that growing up in a church setting, church had done a lot for me. When I say a lot, a whole lot. I think the community, the church community saved my life
Mm,
because I started understanding the concept of hope from church, that I could understand conversations, not just scripture now, I'm saying life, because it gives me a different, or it gave me a different perspective, a community that actually loved me in a certain way, beyond the hopelessness that came as a result of my father's death, and my
okay.
mom not even knowing what life was on and about. That basically just was giving me that, let me use the lingo, the Gen Z lingo, the vibe that, some people actually care for me. So that being said, even leadership was an opportunity for us. So we had the junior high, for instance. You see that, so I think just like Moses, it was inherent. There was something that just triggers you to want to make a place better. So from my home, for instance, we were living in a one bedroom. It was very tiny with my mom, but I would put everything in order. When I say order, everything will be in order. It's small, but it was neat.
Yeah.
I was ensuring that that place was the best and the most comfortable for everyone. Sweep the place, clean this place out, pack the clothes, put them in bags, and all of those things. Those were the things that I was doing. So I knew that there was a leadership role that I was meant to be to play in, not just the fact that I was a firstborn, but I just didn't like anything that is not organized. In fact, some people will say I have OCD. Well, you can say that, but I just like things done properly. So at Foursquare, I was the senior high president at some point, right? In school, I had led a drama group. And so people just find that thing on the inside of me. So again, when they say that when God wants to send you on an errand, it goes through people. So people just find it that, oh, you can, I think you can do this. Come and do this for us. And then I take on the role. It performs excellently well. So by the time I came into Covenant Nation, for instance, what had happened was that I joined the choir, singing in the choir. They were going to start a snapshot. I started, with them, which is the drama group at the time. And at some point, sometimes Pastor just said to me that you can take announcement. from announcements, oh, you can dedicate the babies, from dedicating the babies, oh, somebody wants to do a naming ceremony, go and do that, go and do this. At a funeral, go and preach there, go and do this, go and do that. Now those roles were coming like every now and then. And because I was an entrepreneur, it was easier for me to fulfill those roles, schedule my, what you might call it, and all of that. I think the first time I was ever going to be ordained as a minister was in 2013 at Covenant Nation, by Bishop Oyedepo, right? And then fast forward, I was ordained as a pastor. But at Covenant, you actually will be working in a role before you are actually being ordained. So nobody's ordained before the thing. You must be working in that role, first of all, maybe for years, and you are just wondering what's going on. Not that you are looking for the, what's it called, for the ordination, but then again, yeah, you gravitate into it. So it was a thing that was ongoing, and then the role or the validation, let me use that word, then happened. So the transition was quite interesting. It wasn't so much about, oh, we found you, let's ordain you for this. It was that we were doing the role, and then the ordination came. So I think people's leaders, my leaders, for instance, the people who were over me. I was preaching at Covenant, I'm sorry, at Foursquare, for instance. My mentor saw me and he said, you have the ability to be able to do business and teach people and all of that. I didn't know what they saw. I was teaching as a teenager to teenagers. On a Sunday morning, I was preaching to teenagers on a Sunday morning that my pastor then, Pastor Jide George, saw me and said, you can do this, right? And then they gave me what's it called, the ability to preach on a Sunday morning. That's how I knew even my role as a priest and as a marketplace leader. That's how I knew that so somebody saw in me that I could preach. Another person saw a business person. So I started realizing that, okay, these two roles can actually go side by side, which is what I'm still doing till date.
So, firstly, you always made yourself available for service in
Yes,
church. You
correct.
took up a lot of things in church, always serving diligently, not necessarily looking for leadership, but somehow people always saw that potential in
Correct.
you. And that has, eventually opened up the doors for you to now start pastoring
Yeah.
on a large scale. All right, for somebody who is listening to you or who heard you talk about how you stepped into church leadership and is wondering, how do people even get a pastoral calling? Is there a way? How do people know that they have a calling to
I
be a
do.
pastor,
I
and
do.
how do you prepare?
Okay. I do not know that you will you can orchestrate that thing called the because I think most
Mm,
people, if they have their way, they wouldn't do it. I so
really?
no, I mean, maybe it's a fad now, but it wasn't a fad back then. I don't think it's interesting because I mean, there's a lot of burden on you. I mean, for instance, my wife said to me that never told me that you're going to become a pastor. That wasn't so she said clearly that two things that she never want to marry was a politician and a pastor. So that if you had that inkling towards that she would say, no, a businessman, yes, we can deal with that. But a politician and pastor, so the thing was, it snuck up on us, even on me. I liked to be of service because I know the pain people go through when things are not getting done or when you can't get things done. I know how it feels, which is why I like to do the hard things. I really like to do the hard things. I like sales. I like closing deals. So the biggest challenge is that I do not know that anyone can, find a way around becoming a pastor, right? Now, the more you skim to becoming one, I don't think I mean, personally, I know there's the intentionality about it, but to say that you can orchestrate it is another conversation entirely. Now, I also believe that people who are intentional about it actually get it. which is maybe God has spoken to them. Like Moses, for instance, was they were intentional about him. It was orchestrated that he would become, the person who would emancipate the children of Israel, and it was being groomed, which was why he went into Pharaoh's house and stuff, right? But I don't think he understood it until he was 40 years old that this was the calling. He didn't know that, that was it. So you can get to that thing. But I mean, amongst my children, if any one of them will be a pastor, I already know who is going to be, because there is a certain calling that comes with it. So for me, when I was younger, I had always thought about the essence of God. I would look into the sky and I will have deep conversations with myself as to, why were we created? I was always questioning the conversation on, but I don't think it necessitated being a pastor. I don't think necessarily, but I find myself in gathering people together and saying, can we do this together? So I saw it as more of a leadership thing, but it was tilting towards that pastoral calling. So you get to see that people have this passion they can't stop. They don't know why, and I think that's how callings are in general. There are people who are called to become a mother. Like if you're saying that somebody, so they like it. Maybe they really don't like it, but there is something about them that wants to nurture. Even there's something about them that wants to teach. Even when they are sick, they find themselves still talking about it. Pastoral thing, if I don't get paid, I am happy. So long I'm
Mm.
seeing results. Even in business, I am happy when I'm getting new deals and stuff. So my mind is not so inclined to money, but there are things that just naturally, comes up on in me, so to speak, for that thing to happen. I think that should be it. So I don't think anybody will be. You
So,
can, so people go to seminary school, for instance, for that. But again, it's still the conversation about going to school to learn marketing and understand. It's almost like certificate versus the doing of it. And if you see
yeah,
most people who, I mean, I think I heard for the first time in my life, I think I had Papa Adebo, he said that. And he said, there are a lot of people who are actually very more knowledgeable about. I didn't go to seminary school. I was shocked. I didn't know that happened too with him. That he didn't know that anybody that there are people who have done theology, who have done etymology. He was saying all of those things, and I was shocked. So that thing is a so you can go to school and learn, but there is another side to it, which is that when God calls you, He puts a sign and He puts a mark on your life.
yeah.
Yeah,
All right. So it appears to me that what you're saying is that pastoral work is a calling.
it is.
And there are actually some things that you will see in your life that makes you know whether you are suited for it.
Yeah, yeah,
So, for example, you've always been a very empathetic person. You
yeah.
kind of bear the burdens of other people. So even when there are lots of people in church that you have to deal with, for you that's easy because it's a calling, and you also have kind of like that strength, or you've been blessed with that ability to be very empathetic. All
Yeah,
right, fantastic.
correct.
And of course, you said that there are ways to prepare for it. I mean, people go to seminaries, people go to
Yeah.
Bible school, but beyond, above that, that
Uh,
being called is very important, because
yeah.
if you're not graced or called to do it, the
Mhm.
chances of being successful and being able to do the will of
Yeah,
God, or the
it
work
will
that
be
God has really
difficult.
called you to do,
Mhm.
is going to be very difficult. Yeah, thank you for that. So, you are a pastor and you have a thriving career as well. There are people today who are torn between, the careers that they have, and they actually do have a call. But they're worried whether these two things can coexist. What would
Mm.
you say to that kind of person out there?
Trust God. So the overwhelming aspect of it is that I've never seen God forsake anyone who He calls. And
Mm,
that's why you see Jesus say things like, when I asked you to do something, did you ever lack anything? And some of those things actually start out with, so there are fears in the hearts of people that what if I get into this thing and this doesn't happen and that doesn't happen? And that's where the journey starts. The journey starts with, if I ever call you, you will never lack anything. And my
Mm.
trust had always been in that particular thing, which is what makes me, in fact, I think the healing for our son came on the premise of that as well. Trust me, that I don't want you to be preaching and then running around, they say, your son is in the hospital and all of that. Says, I've called you, I will take care of every other business. So my trust had always been in even the utterance that I get on a Sunday morning, on a Tuesday evening. They are not the things that I can associate with myself. They are things that God Himself is bringing by Himself to me. That when people say these things that you said, is like, "Meh, meh, eh, you mean I said that?" Because the truth about the matter is that we are vessels that God uses. In fact, one of the biggest prayer that one should be praying for pastors is that we don't just want him to be used. Let him also be a blessing to his own self, because you can be a conduit and not retain anything. And
Yeah.
it's one of the biggest mistake most people make. And then they think that, pastors are all that. They are all that because God is all that. So the way to balance it is that we always not just return all the glory in terms of our conversation or a religious speak is actually the truth. So anyone who wants to get into this thing and balance the other thing is the fact that, I mean, for instance, I don't want to ever get to the point where I am depending on ministry for my daily feeding. That God will be the source of total supply. And to be honest, it's easier for you to preach and to do all of those things without depending on anyone and manipulating anyone when you already know where this thing is coming from. And I think I learned it from Paul. Paul said, "These hands of mine have ministered to my needs." Fools, we're not handing the word of God deceitfully. We're not trying to manipulate. So you're not speaking from an hungry stomach. You're not giving prophecy so that people can give money. You're doing those things because this is the truth. And so I think that balance is important. And when people say to me that God is calling me to focus on it, I get a bit, "Ugh." I don't say it's wrong. It's not wrong because God can want him to to himself. But to be honest, there must be a clear-cut balance as far as that is concerned. And those two can work together.
Yeah,
They can work together.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you're out there, you know that you have a calling, and at the same time you're thinking about how to hold your career down. We have a very good example here, Pastor Wale, who is doing that really well, and his advice is: look, trust God. God who has called you will give you the grace
Absolutely.
to be able to do it. So you then need to activate your own faith and take the step. The two can definitely coexist. All right. Okay, so we're getting to one of my favorite aspects, which is the aspect of well being. You've already told us that, there are a lot of responsibilities, and we can see it from running your businesses to your family responsibilities to pastoring this big church. How do you then ensure that your own well-being is taken care of, your energy levels are at the right levels,
Yeah.
and that you don't get burnt out? What are some of your own practices?
I mean, so everything has a time. As even for praying, for instance, as early as 3 a.m., we're awake and we're praying,
Wow.
and every day, like clockwork. The same thing I'm also teaching my children. So they are awake 5:20 every morning. They would have prayed, get ready for school and all of that. Every 3 p.m. as well, I'm at the gym Monday through Friday, every 3 p.m. Except
3
on
p.m.
the
every day at the gym.
every every day at the gym, except for
Fantastic.
Friday. Except for Friday, but I'm still at the gym. But this time around for spa, which means stretches. Being ready for Saturday and Sunday, which is I know is going to be intense. So the only time I don't go to the gym is Saturday and Sunday, and that's because there's work to be done in church and stuff. But you be rest assured that from 3 p.m., 2 hours every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I play squash. Fridays, I'm at the spa, get my haircut, pedicure, what's it called, massage. And by Friday evening, we're warming and gearing up for Saturday. Saturday morning, everybody knows that's 3 a.m. I'm awake, pray till about 5:20. We start our morning devotion at home. By 6:20, we are done. That's by 6:20, we're done. And then we go whether to church or we have a prayer. Everybody knows 7 a.m. every Saturday, all the leaders, we pray 1 hour, 2 hours, sometimes 6 hours, sometimes. And we push like that. And then we do that till, all right. And then we'll get ready for Sunday service. There's even another prayer watch in the evening. All right. So the well-being, and to be honest with you, one of the first things I've learned is that even when you're tired, one of the things that's the instruments to use in the place of rejuvenation is praying in other tongues, because it
Mm.
is used for the edification. So you find me more often than not, even when everything is overwhelming and none of that. Once you can open your mouth to begin to pray in other tongues, you start to feel life injection back into your body. Even somebody asked me a question about, every time he advises people, she gets drained. I said, is the fact that you must increase your praying in tongues. The moment you increase your tongues praying, you will actually have the injection of life back into you, because people come with their several level of energy and they drain you. That's why it's important that you find that thing going on regularly. At every point in time, you must renew that subscription of praying in tongues regularly. Yeah.
Wow, amazing. Amazing. So, what I do see is that you rely on two resources, physical and spiritual.
Oh, yes.
Um, so spiritually it's around, speaking in tongues to get more energized, and you are very intentional about the physical ones. You're exercising, going
Stretching.
for, yes, going to the spa and things like that, and those have helped you to really maintain your well-being. And I imagine that you are also telling professionals that it is important to really focus on our self-care, as well. Very,
Yep.
very critical if we're going to deliver the kind of results that you are currently delivering. All
Yep.
right. We are starting to wind down the podcast today, and I have just one or two questions that I'll ask. And so, if you looked at your journey, which has been amazing, by the way, and you've been extremely successful, and if you had to just choose or speak to us about one factor that you think is responsible, the biggest factor in your success, what would you say that is?
God, in the beginning, in the beginning, God, even in the most professional way, I've seen some of the lessons that I've never learned. And so when somebody says how, I can't attribute it to anything. And sometimes it sounds funny because I think a lot of people want to dull your light and want you to say
Mm-mm.
something really intelligent and stuff. What I found out that in the beginning was God. In the beginning was his word. And the two are actually one. And so at every point in time, you will see me speak about that I've seen God come. Let me give you an example. I hold no man anything today. Zilch, no
Mm.
money, nobody, because sometimes I'm like, how did we get to this point? And I can rely on the fact that God's word told me those things from the very beginning, from the most complicated deals. I mean, I think some years back, maybe like 7 or 10 years back, we made our first 1 billion in terms of what's it called? When the contract came, and they said to me that, we should go and get APG, something bank guarantee or something like that, and then they were going to take one of our house properties and stuff. God reminded me that you have been making confessions that you will not borrow, you will lend, and all of that. And I see him play out in every single decision, even friends that I didn't want, that God brought, that that this person came. You know how you know that you've gotten to a point where you feel that you don't need certain things? God said, this one you need. And so even the things that I think I don't need, that I need, he brings it. The ones that I think, that sifting, that filtering, that conversation, the things that are beyond my understanding, he presents it to me and say, don't worry, I am the one in charge of your life and everything is going to be all right. So that the way, so if somebody says whatever factor, I can explain the other factor, but in the most simplest way is that my story is a story that God orchestrated. So at the center, at the beginning, at the end, in the middle, God. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. It's all about God, and
Yeah.
we can see what He has done with your life because it's been an amazing success story. So,
Thank you.
finally, your final question on career pathways today for that professional who is out there, maybe entry level, mid level, or even people who are just looking to reinvent their paths, but they are struggling with clarity. Some are looking at purpose versus pay, education, all sorts of things that professionals think about as they build or try to build meaningful careers. What one thing or what one message would you want to leave with people who are currently at crossroads?
I think so. When we speak about the concept of God, a lot of people can't conceptualize him in terms of how things happen. So usually, I mean, podcasts like this actually helps you to navigate, and there should be more of these kind of conversations, because a lot of people cannot break down into bits and pieces who the concept of God is. By this kind of conversation, it becomes easier for somebody to see the mirror or their life through the eyes of conversations like this. And if there are no conversations like this, I think it's important to keep talking to people, all right, listening intently to people. Don't let money be the focus for you. If you are to ask me, for instance, that the person who taught me didn't give me all the money in the world, but that's my mentor, for instance. It wasn't that I went to meet him to say, come and mentor me. He was the one who saw something. And so there should be more people. It's not even for the people who are looking out for those things, for instance. There should be more people who are willing to help and handhold people. Because to be honest, confusion is real, that somebody who doesn't have a clue about how life should be, it's one of the reasons why we come up with different things. On the expectant mothers, on the group of unexpectant mothers in Covenant, for instance, somebody had a big challenge. And because we had set up the group, she was panicking on something she gave her child, and the child was acting funny. One singular instruction from the pediatrician who was on the group says, calm down, first of all. It's not a big deal. Nothing's going to happen to your child. Do this thing. Do you know what they said? Give the child water intermittently between 30 minutes. That was what solved the problem. Now, for some people in careers as well, people just need that little instruction that
Mm.
don't go for money first. Once you get on the job, get value by reason of the training. Now you can begin to ask for money based on the fact that you have paid your dues. If I were to tell anyone, for instance, who hasn't learned anything or who is starting out and they are confused or probably in a place of indecision, don't look after money. Get the skill, whatever way, and be very intentional about your growth. Give yourself milestones. Look at other people. Be articulate. Find out what you need to get to where you want to get to. And every dream is valid. Once you know that this thing that is in my heart, God placed it there. And God will not come down from heaven to come and solve that problem. People are the vehicles that God used, and they are all around you. They are not going to be too far away from you. They are everywhere that you are. That's going to be my counsel to people.
Wow. Thank you so much. Those were really powerful nuggets. So don't let it be about money first. Get the skill first. Get the skill first. Look out for resources that will help you be intentional about your career. Pastor Wale, thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you
me
for
today on Career
having me.
Pathway with
Thank you. Thank
Adeola
you.
Kagho. It has been a very, very interesting and exciting journey. It was really nice having you here.
Same.
And to the viewers, I do believe that you have seen how the story of Pastor Wale, from humble beginnings to being really successful, has showed that, nothing is impossible. God can really write the story of our lives and make it beautiful. So if you have found value in today's podcast, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and above all, share this with somebody who really needs it. There are so many people out there who are seeking clarity and need to get to hear this. Thank you very much. Enjoy
Thank
the
you.
rest of your day. Bye bye.
Bye.